I would love to spend months exploring Portugal's fascinating architectural heritage. Moorish, Manuelan, Renaissance, Gothic, and modern styles, all standing together in one country with a huge story to tell. The castles, the medieval villages and fortifications, the pillars and sculpture, narrow and often winding and steep cobblestone streets connecting a labyrinth of alleys and patios, whitewashed walls and terracotta roofs, the historic churches, and azulejo tile. It's possible, in some areas, to stand in one spot, spin 360, and view several of the styles without taking a step. Unfortunately, we only had 2 weeks to explore this jewel of a country, so the goal was to try to squeeze in as much time in nature as we could in the areas of SINTRA, Nazare, and Porto. From the historic center of Sintra, the castle of the Moors can be seen perched high on a hill. The street here is bustling with tuk-tuks, taxis, and buses, transporting tourists to and from the Moorish castle and the Pena Palace. We chose instead to ascend the steep stairway to the Camino de Santa Maria footpath, beginning at the Santa Maria Church. It is a beautiful 45-minute uphill walk through the Sintra forest. Large moss-covered boulders line the path, and stunning vistas open between the trees. The Moorish castle was built in the 8th or 9th century under Islamic rule. The Moors lived here through to 1147 when it was taken by Christian forces. In 1839, King Ferdinand II began restoration of the castle and surrounding area. From the Royal Tower, one of the places where the artist king painted, the Pena Palace can be seen, its orange-yellow walls glowing in the oak, cypress, and pine woodland. Walking from the Castle of the Moors to the Pena Palace only takes about 15 minutes. We decided not to go into the palace, but spent a few hours just exploring the expansive gardens surrounding it, beginning with the Garden of Camellias. Through the Valley of the Lakes, where it started to rain, at first just a drizzle, then steadily increasing, progressing to a steady downpour that soaked right through our rain jackets. The rain added a mystical element to an already enchanting garden with exotic plant species brought from all over the world. We continued past the Pena farm to the chalet of the Countess of Edla, Ferdinand's second wife. King Ferdinand transformed an old monastery into the summer residence of the royal family, influenced by the Romantic movement of the 19th century and surrounded by glorious gardens. The work occurred simultaneously with the restoration of the Castle of the Moors. In Sintra, you get the feeling that you have just been plopped into the pages of a book of a fairy tale. And a visit to Quinta da Regaleira absolutely reinforced that magical aura. The vision of eccentric millionaire and mystic, poet, Freemason, entomologist, and lover of nature, Carvalho Monteiro, was brought to life by Italian architect and creative genius, Luigi Manini. Manini was also a stage designer who created theatrical set pieces. He combined Roman, Gothic Renaissance, and Neo-Manueline styles of architecture with the lush forest surrounding the property to create the Quinta da Regaleira, a place of grottos, waterfalls, ponds, underground tunnels and wells, stone sculptures and towers draped in thick blankets of moss. The whole place is brimming with mystery and symbolism. The wells at the estate are connected by a series of underground tunnels leading to caves, grottos, and other parts of the estate. The larger well, called the Initiation Well, resembles an inverted tower plunging 27 meters into the earth, spiraling downward. A helical staircase wraps around the inside walls. Never used for water collection, It is believed to have been used for ceremonial or initiation rites. Cabo da Roca, the westernmost point of continental Europe, can be reached by a 40-minute bus ride from the SINTRA train station. From here, you can see the stunning rock formations of Praia Arorira and Praia Ursa. I walked along the cliffside trail to a lookout overlooking Praia Arorira, but it's possible to hike right down to Praia Ursa. Looking out over the Atlantic, vast, wild, and endless, the dramatic cliffs drop nearly 100 meters straight into the ocean. Wildflowers, seagrasses, and succulents blanket the slopes. The Capuchos Convent, nestled in the SINTRA forest, was a Franciscan monastery built in 1560. It was designed entirely around the principles of simplicity, austerity, and harmony with nature. The monks who lived here deliberately isolated themselves from worldly distractions, choosing a life of reflection, prayer, and communion with nature. Everything was built with humility in mind. The monks believed comfort was a temptation. So even their beds were made of stone, with only a thin mat or blanket. Cork was used to insulate and soften hard surfaces. The convent wasn't just in the forest, it was designed with the forest. The layout follows the contours of the land. The monks didn't cut down more than they needed. They even built around trees instead of removing them. The idea was to live in complete harmony with creation. Leaving SINTRA, we continued on to Nazaré with a brief visit to the fortified medieval village of Óbidos. It rained almost the entire time during our 2-day stay in Nazaré, but we were out and about despite it, getting thoroughly soaked in the process. On Nazaré Beach, you can find the outdoor boat museum, and just across the street, the sun-dried fish museum, offering insights into the maritime history of Nazaré. We rode the funicular up to Sitio, a dramatic viewpoint 318 meters above sea level. From there, it's a short hike out to the fort of São Miguel Arcanjo, the prime viewing spot of Nazaré's monster waves. Right off the coast of Nazaré lies a gigantic submarine canyon, about 5,000 meters deep and 170 kilometers long. It acts like a giant funnel, channeling deep ocean swell directly toward the beach. As the swell travels through the canyon, it's moving fast and forcefully, and when it suddenly hits the continental shelf, where the ocean becomes much shallower near the shore, it causes the wave to rise rapidly and dramatically. Waves collide and overlap, and together with the right wind and tidal conditions create terrifying monster waves only the bravest big wave surfers dare to ride. The North Beach is home to some of the biggest surfable waves on the planet, as high as 30 meters. The waves we saw were 1/10 of that size, but even so, the raw energy here is palpable. The city of Porto was our next destination, a 3-hour bus ride north of Nazaré. It is a vibrant place perched along the winding Douro River and famous for its stunning 6 bridges, including the architectural marvel, the Dom Louis Bridge. From this vantage point, you can look out over the entire city with its iconic colorful buildings and narrow streets. To the north, the majestic Porto skyline stretches across the horizon, dominated by the intricate architecture of the historic Ribeira district. You can see the terracotta rooftops of Porto's old town, which is nestled along the riverbank, and the steep hillsides that add to the city's charm. On either side of the river, the terraced vineyards of the Douro Valley are visible in the distance, a reminder of the region's famous wine production. The expansive Gaia district lies across the Douro River. From the Jardim de Moro in Gaia, a bit of green space right next to the upper deck of the bridge, you can get a panoramic view of Porto. It's a stunning mix of old and new, nature and urban life, all framed by the mighty Dom Louis Bridge. The wine cellars in Vila Nova de Gaia are like stepping into the rich, velvety history of Portugal's most famous export, port wine. Nestled along the southern banks of the Douro River, the cellars are more than just storage spaces. They are atmospheric, centuries-old warehouses where tradition and craftsmanship are on full display. To get a more intimate experience of the Douro Valley, we boarded an early morning interregional train from the Campana station to the town of Regua. The approximately 2-hour ride was comfortable, with lovely views of the surrounding landscape, dominated by gently sloping hills and dramatic terraces of the Douro Valley, where vineyards trace the contours of the land. From Regua, we took a short taxi ride up the slopes to Fontelas, a picturesque village with centuries-old stone houses and winding cobblestone streets. This was the starting point of a 45-kilometer bike ride, offering glimpses into rural Portuguese life, intertwined with dramatic natural landscapes. We rented e-bikes. I'm pretty sure I would have been done after the first hill without one. The next day was spent in equally exhilarating natural surroundings. We joined a small group tour to Pena de Santa National Park, the only national park in Portugal. We went off-road for a hair-raising ride in a 4x4 Land Rover, along cliff sides with precipitous drop-offs. It truly felt like we were in a movie. We visited one of the several old villages in the park and got a glimpse of the daily life in these isolated places. We hiked down to glittering crystal-clear lagoons with sparkling waterfalls cascading down huge boulders. Some in our group actually went in for a dip, but the water was icy. After time spent lounging by the waterfalls, we enjoyed a traditional Portuguese meal, including green soup, caldo verde, and green wine. And on the subject of food, Portugal has such a tantalizing variety. I've never tasted food so amazing. Simple, bold flavors, rustic comfort, and ocean fresh. Cod, sea bass, sole, grilled sardines, croaker, roasted octopus. For after dinner, there's nothing like Portugal's iconic cherry liqueur, ginja, sometimes served in a chocolate shot glass. And then for the desserts. From Sintra's queijadas and travesseiro, and Nazaré's sardinha doce, to the famous pastel de nata, which you can find in every cafe, and much, much more. When we arrived in Porto, our Airbnb host greeted us with cheese and bread, a home-baked cake, and a bottle of wine. It was typical of the generous hospitality we experienced throughout our trip. Mil obrigadas to the people of Portugal who we met on our travels for sharing your beautiful country, customs, and delicious food with us.